We are live.
I think we're live. Hello, hello, happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. We've got demon sounds, so we're being haunted.
Haunted crickets.
It is a little weird, actually. Okay, this is a surprise live. We were not necessarily planning this, but we were bored on a Tuesday,
Thought
so
we'd see if
Wednesday.
anyone
Is it
was.
Tuesday?
It's Tuesday, yeah.
Tuesday.
Thought we'd see if anyone was up and around.
We're just getting soaked out here.
Maybe that's the sound effect of the rain.
I don't know. It's not actually.
Oh.
Because it was happening the other day when we were watching a movie.
Hmm.
But anyways, let me lower this down a little bit. There we go. Okay. So our question for the public is, if you're a Christian, why do you still believe in this thing called Christianity? My patience is tested on it. Don't believe it anymore. Interested to hear your thoughts, though, and why you perhaps still do. What are your thoughts?
Or even, I don't know, are you on some spectrum of belief? That could also be the case. You did, you kind of do, you kind of don't.
Could be a thing where. Also, I don't know if they can hear me or not. I have no way to test my audio.
Looks like our mic's on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, but I had that thing where I had to push to talk. Wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. Oh, I had to push to hear.
Yeah. I think it's up here.
Maybe I'm just not going to touch the button and I'm just going to see.
Well, hopefully someone will come up here in a minute and we can test some of your sound out.
Yeah. I'm gonna put a YouTube in on the background. If you want to maybe talk about like a latest book you're reading or something.
Well, we both just
Fill
finished a
time.
crazy book.
Yeah.
For the second time, we finished a book at the similar time.
Which is awesome.
Uncultured. It was actually quite an intense read.
Okay, it seems to be working for me.
Cool. Kind of autobiographical about a girl who was raised in, what was it, the Children of God cult?
Children of God cult.
Yeah. And broke free of that just to join the military and realize how similar the structure and the rules and the learning not to question anything, all kind of cultish. A little dark, a little fascinating. Highly recommend it. If anyone is looking for a book recommendation, I can't say her name, Danielle something Young, I want to say.
Let's go with Daniela Young.
So yeah, Daniela.
But the book is called Uncultured, and yeah, she did survive a very horrific cult called the Children of God cult. Fundamentalist.
Wasn't as aware of this one.
Very. Yeah, I something worth looking into. There's actually a documentary on it from a while ago.
I'm interested in that.
Yeah, it was an interesting situation because unlike the like Waco, Texas Branch Davidian cult, there wasn't like a FBI raid and mass casualties. It was more of a just children unfortunately getting taken advantage of, and they were doing it quickly across multiple countries, so it was tough.
And they moved around a lot every time they felt threatened, which I found interesting. Also, I suppose it wasn't Waco, but there was another cult that did that.
Well, Jim Jones left the States when
Yeah,
they
that's
started to
right.
get pinned down. They just didn't do it fast enough, essentially. But yeah,
Interesting. Yeah. Not completely unlike religion, in my opinion, but maybe a little more severe.
well, I think that the concept of the book is that any sort of group, religious or not, if you've got a group that can empower people, sometimes if that like groupthink goes the wrong direction,
Right.
it can cause like major problems. It doesn't. I mean, it can be a sports team. It can be a like anything. Just like that groupthink when you're in some sort of like a
And the fear of questioning.
yeah,
I think
especially
is
if
a
there's
big
like a
one.
hierarchy and if somebody
Right.
has like the reins of like I'm the definitive source or opinion. Yeah, that's a problem. Oh, looks like we got some
Got Xander
chat.
in the chat, and I see a couple people coming in. We are here to have conversations. If anyone wants to call in on our link and talk about your beliefs or
Feel free to call in. Feel free to chat in, whichever you're comfortable with. If you call in, you don't have to go on camera. That's completely optional. I woke up at 4 in the morning, so you be coming at us like guns down. Like
We've had a couple of rough nights.
we are, yeah, pretty chill today. Even though we're both wearing black sweaters in this darkened rain, very moody, very
It was not
broody.
planned. Not planned at all.
It's kind of, it really wasn't.
No, doesn't look bad.
Hey, Xander says hi. Hi
Hi,
back.
Xander.
Thanks for
Welcome
joining.
in.
Joining? I'm not sure. So yeah, I guess some other things that we've been kind of looking into recently. I've been diving into a lot of like archaeological studies. I remember growing up, and there was William Albright was the famous biblical archaeologist from like the 1950s, and it did a great job for the time. I mean, there was a lot of like good, like discovered Jericho, for example. I mean, that's huge. The problem, of course, is that they were setting out and being funded to prove that the Bible was like accurate. And it's sort of like if 2,000 years from now, um, future civilizations discover Rockefeller Center, that they believe that Spider-Man's real because Rockefeller Center existed. The existence of Jericho does not prove the Old Testament necessarily. But there's some really good new archaeology out there that's actually lending some like really good new discoveries in terms of like proving certain stories in the Bible, also like maybe shedding some light on maybe how things were a little bit different than what we initially thought. So I'm all for always learning new stuff, and yeah, that's so we've got a question. What are we all doing? So we're here to just kind of have some conversations. You can type in the chat. You can call in, video in, depending on what you prefer. The link is up above. But we're just interested in why Christians still believe. We're formerly Christian, had been for decades, and then left the faith. And so
Not together and not at the same time.
not at the same
we both
time,
did,
independently, but interested to know why Christians are still remaining Christian in light of all the new information and views that are out there. Essentially, I'm reading a book on Hinduism right now. It's kind of interesting.
Well, and I don't know if it's even necessarily new information, but just like more easily accessible to seek out what's more true and what's more believable and what's more plausible, and form new beliefs, and not just like continue to believe something because you were raised in it or you always believed it before. I think even if you're not going to like change your viewpoint, I think it's still important to ask the hard questions and like seek what's the most true.
True. Yeah. I mean, a Cookie Monster just popped in. They believe because they should not still be alive. Definitely would like you to elaborate on that. Would love to hear more about that story. Feel free to call in as well. I don't know. I think that there is a lot of. You're right. It's more accessible information because
Right, it's not necessarily new per se, but if you were always born in a bubble and there wasn't not only just the internet, but like the rise of these what is the word I want? Spaces for knowledge seeking. I don't know. That was really clunky. That didn't come out right. But there's just more less hive minds is maybe what I want to say. Like more push and pull against what might be the standard or the norm. And I think that's opening up a lot of conversations that are making individuals, at the very least, ask questions. Hello, my dusk frame friend.
Hey, Dust Frame. Also, Cookie Monster, great question. Or statement. You said that you experienced miracles. I always mispronounce this, so my apologies to any persons that speaks the native language. But Sathya Sai Baba, who is Hindu, passed away in 2011. Had many healing and eyewitnesses to cancer curing miracles. So Christian miracles, just, I mean, they mean about as much to me as like Hindu miracles, Islam miracles. You take your pick of any religion, they all have healing miracles. We can go through those, but I would be interested in your miracle because I'm sure you have a great one. My grandpa had a miracle and survived 3 heart attacks, at least 2, um, and also had stents and some really good science and medicine behind
I was
it.
going to
But
say, that sounds like medicine might have been involved.
yes, but had he not been discovered right when he did, he could have passed away. Miracle. Chalk it up. There's a lot of miracles out there, folks. So, but interested to hear your miracles. We're not discounting miracles. Just interested to know why your miracles
Have
as
more merit
a
than anyone
Christian,
else's.
yeah, are different than any other faith's miracles, which seem to be rampant across the globe.
Looks like our friend Adam is here.
Hey, Adam.
Welcome in.
Welcome in. Oh, I guess I could do this better. Sorry, I was getting stuff set up and I don't have my normal configuration. Now I can see the chats.
There you go.
There we go.
You're doing great, buddy.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah, we both came off of a couple of sleepless nights and a little tummy bug, so we may be more vulnerable if you guys have some good points to make.
Or any miracles.
On top of our game. Yeah. I don't know. That didn't save us from that food poisoning, but.
True. Multiple explosions, Cookie Monster. Okay, Cookie Monster, if you're like popping in here and you're saying you survived multiple explosions, if this is like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy experience that you had, I might actually be interested. This could be a real miracle situation. Continue to elaborate if you will, or feel free to call in. Also, very accepted.
What's accepted?
Calling in.
Oh, yes.
Using the link above.
Please call in anyone who's
choose your audio, choose your video, yay or nay. It's totally optional.
Well, audio is not optional necessarily. If
yeah,
you're calling in, if you're on chat.
Yeah, but we did have a situation. Our buddy Lars. So Cookie Monster has a really good point that it's rare to have a miracle. So statistically speaking, and y'all can fact check me on this, every single month, a person experiences a 1 in a million chance thing. Now, it could be so mundane that you don't even notice, but it could be significant. This is just statistically speaking.
That's a fair point.
And apparently, if you're a Christian, you can call it a miracle. But prove me wrong. Come on up. I'm not trying to be specious or facetious.
Specious?
Yeah, that was.
I'm not sure if that's the word you wanted.
I read it in a book one time.
It sounds to me like it's...
She's an English lit major, so...
Yeah, let's not go there. Duskframe says that if miracles are evidence for God, tragedies are evidence against one.
Ooh, and there's a lot more tragedies in my experience.
I mean, there's tragedies all the time.
Oh, that's a really good one. Duskframe, we are going to use that. That is good stuff right there. Wow.
I need to put that on a notepad.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, let's pick another miracle worker. We're talking about miracles. How about...
Give me a good one. Give me one I don't know about.
Okay. This was from a Buddhist. Okay. Dipa Ma, D-I-P-A Ma, M-A, lived from 1911 to 1989. Okay, so this is fairly recent. Reported levitation and bilocation, penetrated walls, healed her own heart disease through meditation. There's like famous people that documented accounts of her abilities. Apparently, Western and Indian meditation students were witnesses as well as insight meditation teachers. So there's several sources.
Bilocation is interesting.
In fact, there's even...
Does that mean you're in two places at once?
There's even a book written on this individual that was written in 2005 called The Life and Legacy of a Buddhist Master. Hey, you know what? Here's the problem. Just like Jesus, it was written after they died. So if they lived until 1989, this was written in 2005. Christians, you're going to be able to say... not original, but maybe this individual was literate and could write, and maybe they even wrote their own things. So we might have firsthand sources.
There's a lot more chance of literacy and up to 1989.
Y'all, I'm interested. I'm interested. But anyways, there's also tons, especially if you're Catholic, tons of Mary sightings. You're getting summoned. There's tons of
Mm-mm.
Mary sightings, and Jesus is seen in toast. There's been bleeding statues. Are these reasons why people still believe in Christianity, or is it more holistic than that? I guess that would be the question. Oh, thanks, Dan. Perfect. Oh, nice. Okay, okay.
I'm just laughing at Dusk's comment.
It's good. It's good. But yeah, I just don't. I'd just be interested in reasons. So
Well, I mean, I guess we could talk about miracles tonight. We've got the flood behind us.
we do have the flood.
Supposedly, if you believe that that's accurate information, it's a pretty miraculous story.
Do Christians still believe in the flood, or do they believe that the Old Testament was something that was like just allegories and random stories, and that they were just like there for or not like kind of messages and
Or
not
like
real? Be interested if there's any Christians in the
influential
chat.
teachings rather than literal history. No,
I used to believe that it was
don't
real.
ask your family.
Yeah, I felt that they actually happened, that the earth was created in 6 days, that God rested on the seventh day, that there was a global flood. It wasn't just local. I believed that Elisha called down fire from heaven and then murdered all the priests of Baal. I believed all of it wholeheartedly, actually. In fact, it's really funny because the same Christians that will come and say, yeah, dude, but you weren't really a Christian. I'm like, yeah, but you're not really a Christian because you don't even believe in the stories in the Bible. Like, what is that? In my opinion. Now, maybe that's where I got it wrong. If there's Christians in the chat and you have a position of, well, the reason you're not a Christian anymore is because that's ridiculous.
You were believing wrong.
Right. And I should have been believing differently. That's an interesting perspective. I would be interested in.
Yeah, that's fair.
In your thoughts on that.
Maybe there's a different guideline on how to tell which parts of the Bible are real and which parts are metaphors and which parts we just don't believe because they're not as nice.
Hard to say.
Hard to say.
Okay, so we have hundreds of direct disciples, including a prominent one in Hinduism by the name of Vivekananda, and large crowds at Dakshineswar. Sorry, guys, about my pronunciations. This was in the 1800s, so from 1836 to 1886. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who is Hindu, devotees reported seeing him levitate, heal disciples through touch, clairvoyant knowledge of distant events, and collective mythical trance states. And this is all eyewitness documentation.
Well, and collective experience supposedly is one of the best proofs.
Paul basically dropped in 1 Corinthians the largest eyewitness sighting of Jesus, which simply says, and 500 people saw him.
Right.
And that was written 20 to 30 years after Jesus died. So it's kind of like, oh yeah? And 500 people saw that. These are documented witnesses that saw this stuff. So I don't know. I'm leaning more, personally, I'm leaning more towards Hinduism, or even when Muhammad split the moon in two, there were more eyewitnesses in modern times. That's during the 600 CE versus 2,000 years ago. That was written 20, 30 years after the fact. It just doesn't, the miracles and the stuff just don't seem just very credible. But interested in your thoughts. Call on up.
I mean, if you think that you've experienced something that changed your life that would be convincing, we would love to hear about it.
Yeah. Let's go back to some of the good ones. One of my favorites, because I'm a huge fan of like the whole like Greek mythology, or not Greek mythology, like the philosophers which started, okay, we could say Zarathustra had some major influence there,
Mhm.
but Pythagoras, and then of course we have Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. But Pythagoras, obviously famous for the Pythagorean theorem, appeared simultaneously in Metapontum and Croton the same day. Now, if I recall, this is like a week's journey running away from each
Is
other.
that another like bilocationism?
Yeah, that'd be like by location. And it was actually one of those things where there was like a festival or like a gaming event. And it's like he popped up on one side or in one place. And it's like, oh, but I can't miss this other one. And so he popped up in the other one. This was documented. Of course, this goes way before Jesus. This is like 570 to 500 BC is when Pythagoras lived. Um, but he also predicted an earthquake. He got bit by a deadly serpent and he killed it with his own bite. And this is all documented with the same sort of like, witnesses that we see from like the New Testament miracle, testimonies of Jesus. So just seems to be like a lot of this miracle stuff kind of throughout history, not necessarily, needing to have like documented sources like there are today. And interestingly enough, there's documented sources that we have today of non-Christian miracles. But we can skip the whole miracle conversation. We can get into something like, the text is true. We can get into personal stories about things that maybe individuals have experienced. But I think I need to steer away from the miracles and like the personal experiences, because what I think happens is people are like, but I had this thing happen to me.
Right.
And we kind of shut it down.
And that's sort of across the board.
Yeah, that's usually where these go. And then once we get there, then we start talking about this, and then the people are, oh, we have a caller, a Max, I think.
I believe that says Max.
All right, we're going to test our audio here. Max, are you over the age of 18?
Hello, I'm 32 years old.
Oh, excellent.
Oh,
okay.
And it's very quiet for me.
Yeah, I'll turn it up a little bit. I think we're good.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I have really bad equipment.
Hey, you're okay. I can turn you up over here.
Give
No
us 1
problem
second.
at all.
Sure.
Max, what are your beliefs? Do you believe in a Christian God?
Yeah, I'm Christian. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Okay. So obviously, like our platform, we want to be approachable. We're just basically asking, as former Christians, like why Christians, today still believe in Christianity. Like, what is it for you that makes Christianity real or worth like still believing in?
Sure, that's very interesting. Can I just make a quick introduction of why I became a believer?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Can you turn it up a little more?
All right. So yeah, I was not raised in a Christian family at all. I come from Quebec in Canada.
Okay.
Actually, that's why I have such an accent. I'm French Canadian, and so my first language is French, and I learned English through playing on the computer and things like that.
Oh, wow.
Wow, good job. Seriously,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Good work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So and now I'd say that I keep up with English by having interest in watching videos and learning about the many things. Yeah, it's great. I love English actually.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so I was a fierce atheist when I was younger, and I really did not believe in God. And actually, I was really against anything that was related to faith. I hated it so much. I thought that it made people bad, that it made people disillusional. I thought that believers were just stupid people that did not understand anything about life. And I had a lot of judgment for other people when I was young. I think I must not be the only person that when I was like 16, I thought I was right and
Sure.
nobody else
Not
is
a
right.
single other one.
Did you? So was your
I'm the
family
only one.
background? So was your family background like non-believers or atheists, or were they
I'd
like
say
part of the
they're
faith?
not really interested in religion at all, and I wasn't really interested either, but I became more interested in hating religion because uh, I was, I think I was really seduced by like the new atheism movement, by
Mm.
Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris. I watched the debates and things like that. I used to really enjoy watching these debates, and I laughed a lot. Listening to Christian trying to praise their religion and things like that. But through watching these debates, actually, I became interested in Christianity because I thought suddenly listening to these debates that there was actually some arguments for the existence of God. Suddenly I was thinking, maybe I'm being a bit hypocritical when I'm, you know, just thinking that I know it all and that I'm not that God, that religion is just for stupid people. So I just took an interest in learning a bit about the arguments for the existence of God, and I jumped into a big whole rabbit hole. Oh my God, so much information, and I just took a passion for it. And at some point after, I'd say maybe 5 to 10 years of watching this stuff, I became convinced that there was really strong arguments for the existence of God, and so I started to have more openness to believe in a spiritual realm and not be a strict naturalist or materialist. And
Yeah.
after that, I'd say that it's a more personal journey. I'm not interested in maybe going into the details of how I came to Christian faith after that, but I just want to share my testimony of that. It's not I didn't came to faith. I didn't come to faith through religious indoctrination at all. I came through faith through evidence and logic, I'd say. Yeah.
Well, first of all, big W to that because I came to faith through indoctrination, so
You
I
never
didn't
weren't in
I
faith.
didn't really have a choice.
Yeah.
So actually that is that's comforting to me, right? Because like if you live like 35 years of your life and all of a sudden one day you're like, wait a minute, did I just dedicate like most of my known existence to something that is possibly not real? And then you're like, oh, okay, well now I gotta let's reel this let's reel this whole life experience back. Now on the flip side, you had it just the opposite, right? So when did
Exactly.
you yeah, when
Exactly.
did you how many years ago was this that you like kind of started to, because it's not like an instant switch, I assume, where you're just one day
Absolutely
like,
not. No,
hey,
no, it
I'm
took a lot of
Christian.
time. No,
Yeah.
yeah, it took a lot of time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I felt exactly like you feel when I started to have doubts about my strong belief in atheism. I was so convinced that there was no possible way that there was a spiritual realm, that it was just stupid stuff for stupid people. But once I realized that, oh, actually, there's really intelligent people that believe otherwise than me, I kind of felt betrayed by my own arrogance to think like, oh my God, I don't know much about that stuff, and why am I like so sure that I have the truth? So I kind of felt betrayed in some way, but not in a way that people had indoctrinated me, but that I kind of had indoctrinated myself.
And how like how many years ago, like how long have you been like a Christian approximately now? Like just ballpark, you think?
I'd say it's been around 5 years that
Okay.
I'm Christian. Yeah.
So, and I'm gonna let you talk because I feel like I'm rambling here. But I had an interesting experience that was like, again, you and I lived at completely polar opposite experiences. Where I actually went to a school before I went to college that was specifically designed to prepare Christian kids for college so that they didn't get deconstructed with higher learning. And I don't feel, first of all, that I am more smart today than I was 10 years ago, right? When I was still hardcore Christian and arguing in the debate forums and being an apologist. So I agree with you on that 100%. There's smart people on both sides of the fence. Intelligence, in my opinion, really has very little to do with like whether a person has faith in their,
That's
belief
so.
system.
Can I just say that it's so refreshing to hear? To hear, honestly, I do believe that also, and it's really refreshing to hear. Honestly, thank you.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. I think, and if I can just kind of
Yeah, absolutely.
piggyback on that, I think the most important thing is not to just keep blindly doing what you've always done. I think if you're asking questions, and to your point, you said you were so far convinced one direction that you weren't even allowing yourself to question that.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That and I think that it can be you can lure yourself into that type of thinking with Christianity, with any type of religion, but also I think with atheism.
Mhm.
So it can come either you can have intelligence on either side of the debate, but you can also have, stupidity in the
sure.
both side too. Yeah.
You have to still be able to, no matter where you're at, right? You still have to be able to apply logic and reason. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so if I'm convinced that there is no God whatsoever, that this universe is just a repeating cycle of big bangs, big crunches, there's nobody behind it, and then all of a sudden, like when I'm 75, they discover something weird, an anomaly, through whatever means, and they're like, well, wait a minute, we can't explain that, but the odds are it's some sort of like deity realm or like alien whatever. I can't be like, well, that just can't be. I know that there's not X. Therefore, despite the evidence, I refuse to believe. That's what kept
Yeah,
me.
I think you have to
Yeah.
be open to evidence and to, I think to assume that there is no spiritual realm. I think that was my mistake personally. I think you should not assume one way or another, honestly, because that can lead to self-deception in my mind.
That's super interesting to me. So one thing because I don't want to forget, like when I was in that school that they prepped us for college for, they had doctors, many of which I still have their books, that creationist, doctors and geologists proving young Earth and just a lot of things that were basically trying to prove the scientific validation of the Old Testament stories, despite the modern scientific implications of like modern discoveries and that sort of thing. So what I came away with from that you know uh, session that I had, it was a camp, was, well, I'm going to a school that has doctors in it that are going to tell me evolution's true. This doctor is also a doctor, and they're saying that evolution's not true. Therefore, I can't just believe someone who's a doctor to tell me one way or the other. And it really did do a good job of like stealing me up before I went into that experience. But to your point, there's smart people on both sides of the fence. I think what we really have to do is just kind of really look at like what's out there and what we know, I guess, and kind of make our own individual best judgments.
Of course, and in my mind, to try to deny evolution is a fool's game. But I understand that some people have a really strong conviction that it's the right way to go to deny science. To me, that's really foolish. But I don't want to make a quick judgment on these people without having looked more into what they say. But at first glance, I would say that it's a foolish errand. That's my opinion personally.
Like, yeah, like for me it was geology and very similar to like evolution, in terms of what first got me thinking. Now, I'm not saying that this proves or disproves the Bible, but the thing that got me thinking outside of my own like bubble, because I was convinced that what I knew was true. I was unwilling to listen to reason outside of what I felt was true. and I wasn't educated enough in biology or physiology to understand evolution really, and I also wasn't taught evolution when I was growing up. I was just taught all the opposite. And so for me it was geology, where it's like, if god if God made the earth look young, but the earth is really old according to geology, because I did understand geology, I was like, either God like tried to fake everybody out as like a test of their faith, which seemed a little like deceptive, and I could have been reading into that, but or like it is just old, and the Bible story of how things were made wasn't real. I mean, you can go to the date God is like 1,000 years, but what are your thoughts on that regarding like the Old Testament's like story of how the world came to be versus like evolution? Because it sounds like, for the most part, it sounds like you kind of believe, based off of the evidence, that things kind of progress biologically through evolution.
Well, to me, discovering how the world is a Christian enterprise. I'd say that from what I understand of history, the scientific revolution was guided in a lot of ways by Christians that had in mind the idea that they wanted to, see exactly how God made things and not assume that they knew how the world was. I would see that in the same way, in the fact that I think that the Bible, you know, you I don't think that the Bible you can take everything literally, and I think that there are motivation by God in the Word of God to not say things in a literal way, and that there are teachings in the Bible that are not meant to be read as like the exactly how we would read them if we had no context of the history, and also if we had no reflection about what the word says. I'd say that's a quick summary of how I would think.
So, is it fair to say you're not a Bible literalist?
Absolutely not. I think
Okay.
that you have to read the Bible in the context first of the whole book, but also in the context of what each chapter is related to in history, who it's talking to, and maybe try to understand why it's written that way. So, of course, I think that there are also good arguments to say that some things in the Bible are written in a way that would make us doubt that it's the Word of God. But I think that there are also good arguments to say that you can harmonize that with other arguments to say that there is a good context for it, and an understanding that is maybe not exactly what is plainly what we see in the text without reflection.
Do you feel like, just to get kind of like a baseline, because when I was a Christian, I did believe that like the Bible was like that God told the people what to write in the Bible. And I believed that like, maybe there was some, scribal errors as it got translated into different languages. Humans could screw up. It always bugged me a little bit that I was like, but dang it, if this was God's real word, like if I was God, I'm just be a little narcissistic for a second. If I was God and I was like, okay,
I want to communicate.
yeah, let's say Moses, here, I'm going to tell you what to write down, okay? Now, trust me, every single time a scribe is copying Moses, my masterpiece that I want all of humanity to know for all eternity, I'm going to be like, you missed a jot and a tittle right there. Like, screwed up. And so, what are your thoughts in terms of like, what is this book then? If it's like, just it was some stories, like how much do we believe that the stories are like real? How much do we feel like they were accurate? Like, can we trust? How much of it can we trust as far as like something that's actually real?
It's a very interesting question. Um, I'm I would say first that I'm not an expert in the history of the Old Testament or the New Testament. Actually, I'm starting to have more interest into going deeper into many subjects about the Bible, but I don't want to say that I'm an expert in anything about that. I am not. But how I would see that personally is that the Bible, to me, I think, is not written by God or dictated by God in any way. I think humans wrote it, and I think that God has a plan in the way that the Bible was written. That through humans, He organized the world in such a way that the revelation that He has given in the Bible is sufficient and good enough so that it gives the message that He wanted to give to humanity. That would be how I would say.
What are your thoughts on that?
I want you to go first.
Well, I guess I'm just kind of curious. So, like, do you feel then like, so okay, so like thinking like big picture here. So, like, in the Old Testament, we're talking about around, and people in the chat are going to blow up, blah blah blah. Let's say I'm going to give everyone the benefit of the doubt here and go very conservative theological like time frames. So, if Moses wrote the Old Testament, okay, the first 5 books of the Torah, that's maybe putting it around like 1500 BCE. And so are you saying like, okay, that the traditional thought is that Moses in around 1500 BCE or so wrote the Old Testament, but he just did it like he's just a dude, right? So if there's contradictions or like theological issues in like those first 5 books that Moses wrote, it's like, he was just a dude, but God, like,
Inspired?
I don't even know if inspired is the right word. Moses was like close to God, maybe he prayed a lot. Like what's your level of like confidence that like those first 5 books, and I'm not even gonna go into the contradictions of the first 5 books. This isn't a setup. I'm just kind of curious, like your scale, like how much was like those books, and even like the Old Testament in general, because then after Moses, then you've got like the what they call the Deuteronomical history, which is like the Joshua, Judges, First Samuel, or First Second Samuel, First Second Kings, and then this like history of the Israelites that was written in this kind of block, and then you got another block that was written after that during like a Babylonian exile, and then you've got like prophets. And so to your point, like all these things are being written in kind of like sections by different people, throwing all the cards just on the table. There's a lot of just like theological contradictions. There's a lot of like just numerical and timeline and all sorts of just like things that just don't match and add up. Like, you agree, obviously, with your prior statement that like it's clearly not like some like mastermind deity sat down with a quill
Right.
and wrote a perfect, Harry Potter structured narrative with like multiple books. It's got some
I would say
plot
not at
holes.
all.
Yeah,
Not at
yeah,
all.
yeah, yeah. There's some plot holes. So I guess where I'm at, and this is my own like my own upbringing, like what is your like thought process then of how that comes together, and why should we believe
Sure.
any of it, or how much of it, or if it's just like, if it feels good, go with that part. You know what I mean? Like what?
No, I think as a Christian, to me, I see my belief as some kind of a web of belief, and of course, some belief are more important than others, and some I just don't understand at all. Because actually, I'm just 32 years old, and I still have a lot to study. But I don't think that you should be that you should not have a strong belief in something just because you don't understand everything about it. So to me, what I would say is that the belief that the Christian Bible is a perfect word, totally inspired, that's a belief that's not in the most important part of my belief. I'm ready to be convinced one way or another. Personally, right now, I am not convinced that it's totally like without error. I believe that it's written by humans and that God can use these written texts in a way that serves his purposes in the end. But I don't think that they have to be without contradiction or that they have to be perfect in any way. I don't think so.
So what are some things about okay, so first of all, to take a step back. So you do believe that the Bible is important though, correct? Like it is an
Sure.
important
Yes.
part. On
Yeah.
a scale of like 1 to 100, how important is the Bible to Christianity?
Well, I think the question is a bit vague, but I would say that
Like if you had
I,
to, like not to put it into contrast with like personal experience, faith, Bible, but like if if faith is 100 and personal experience is 100, how accurate is the or how important is the Bible? Maybe it's like a 20, maybe
let,
personal
let,
experience is 100. You
let
know
me
what I mean?
explain. Let me explain why I said it's a vague question. It's not. I think it's not a bad question at all. It's just I don't. I'm not sure to understand exactly what you mean by the Bible, because I think that the Bible is revelation about God. So of course it's really really important. But do you mean the accuracy of everything, or like the?
I'd say holistically. So like for example, if there are certain things that you pull out of the Bible that cause you to live your life a certain way. So let's just say Jesus said, um, only wear green or you're going to burn in hell. And that was in all of the Gospels. Paul wrote about it, and it was even in Revelation. Would you wear green? Or is it like, dude, it's just in the Bible. It's really not that important. Or is it like, no, dude, it's in the Bible. It's
Good
important.
question.
Like, how important is the Bible in terms of like your actual belief system?
Or your actual behaviors.
Holistically, I mean, yeah, not like, oh, well, there's in one in four of the gospel or in three of the gospels he said green, in one of the gospels he said foam green, and Paul said teal. Okay, we get it. It's that genre of color.
Well, I think that there are foundational things that we should follow in the Bible. Let's say maybe the resurrection of Christ, the deity of Christ, things like that. Wearing green would not be something that I would fit into the most important part. No.
Okay, and he doesn't actually talk about what colors to wear.
Sure, and I understand that's like a simplistic analogy, but I think the bigger question is if there's a lot of laws that were really important in the Old Testament and they're not gone in the New Testament and Jesus still honors those laws, if you struggle with any of those, at what point does that become problematic?
Yeah, I think that it can absolutely become problematic if it comes to challenge your most important belief about maybe who God is, why you believe in God, and things like that. Yeah, I think it could be a very very hard challenge, definitely. So I'm interested in the ideas that you're putting forward. Yeah, sure, go.
So I guess, and you can even go like even to okay. So we that's actually a really good point, and definitely I want to go there for sure. As far as like the because Jesus said in Matthew on multiple accounts like not one jot, not one tittle of the law will be removed.
Absolutely, yeah.
In multiple books of the Old Testament, in the prophets, and in Genesis, and I can pull some of these up, but it talks about how like there will be sacrifices in the new kingdom forever. Like even the like obviously Hebrews in the New Testament and a lot of the New Testament books say like now that Jesus has died for everyone's sins, we don't have to have sacrifices anymore. But the Old Testament clearly states that no, in the second age, in the age to come, everlasting, there will be like sacrifices in Jerusalem. Like there's just this like whole concept in the Old Testament of the judgment day. And when the judgment day happens in the Old Testament, there's the house of Israel is going to be reestablished. There's going to be sacrifices in the temple. In fact, it even says besides blood sacrifices, there'll also be grain sacrifices. And in the New Testament, it's this whole thing where Jesus came in and like now there's not going to be any sacrifices when he comes back a second time. It's just an interesting dichotomy. But have you seen some of those? Like, are you familiar with kind of what I'm talking about on those?
In some way, I'm not an expert on that subject, but I think it's a very interesting thought. Yeah, it's definitely this dichotomy in at face value can be definitely an argument against you know uh, let's say the consistency of the character of God.
Yeah, it's interesting. And if nothing else, to your point, and this is where I like where your head's at is it like and I'm with you on this, like as far as like being like open-minded is like maybe it's not problematic. Maybe we're just not understanding it correctly. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
maybe.
that's and that's why we're having this conversation. Like
Yeah,
we definitely aren't here to say like oh, what we think is right, but there are some things that have clearly like led us to like question why we believe what we believe,
Of
and
course. Yeah.
ultimately led us necessarily away.
Hmm.
And that's why we did this, because we're just like, you know what? Maybe we're not understanding correctly, and this is a great platform to just have a conversation. I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna throw a couple verses up that kind of outline this a little bit. And thank you, Adele, for bringing this up. So this, let me make it bigger on the screen here. Whoops. Oh boy, on the wrong screen. Okay, so this is Matthew 5:17 through 19, and I will always say read the whole chapter. Never, I hate people take stuff out of context, but this is Jesus. He said, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law." So right now what he's doing is he's actually speaking to the Pharisees, who were introducing new oral traditions and new oral laws that were outside of the hundreds of Mosaic laws that were established in the Torah. And he was actually ratcheting things up. He was saying, not only do you not murder, but if you have hate in your heart, that's the same as murder. Not only should you not like covet covet your neighbor's wife, but if you have lust in your heart over another person, that's the same thing, right, as this 10 commandments. So he was
Yeah.
actually taking the laws and ratcheting them up a notch. Now
Yeah.
there were
Yeah.
certain laws that the Pharisees were putting into place that were like in between the lines and gray areas that Jesus was not a fan of. He was clearly against those Pharisaic oral traditions. But what he said was, I have not come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter, or if you like the King James Version, he says, not one jot, not one tittle, will pass from the law
It was kind of fun.
until it is accomplished. He's talking about like the second, kingdom.
Yep.
So it says, therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus seems to be like saying, like, listen, yes, I can forgive sins, I can heal people. Eventually he does, dies on the cross. But he's saying this doesn't mean that I'm doing away with the law. You
Yeah, I
still
agree.
need to follow the law.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it sounds like.
Well, I think it's a bit more complicated than that, but I agree with the sentiment. I think that Jesus said clearly that the law is not to be abolished and that it was there for a reason, and that we need to understand that God is a holy God and that sin is very, very serious to him because he's so holy that he cannot, and just also. So he cannot just wave away sin, and the law is part of that paradigm.
But
Paradigm.
aren't there instances where he does just wave away sin?
Instances where he does wave away sin.
I mean, I believe that there are instances where he can just forgive without punishment.
I think you're talking about when like he's healing that person that was a paralytic, and then they're all getting mad at him because he just healed someone and on the Sabbath or something, and he's like, well, is it easier for me to heal someone or just say your sins are forgiven? Boom, your sin. Or no. He's forgiving sins, and they're like, you can't do that. He's like, well, is it easier for me to forgive sins or say get up and walk? And then the dude just like gets up and walks, which is a
Yeah,
pretty baller move.
yeah. I think, to my understanding, what Jesus would be doing there is to show, well, you might not believe that I can forgive sin, but let me show you that I can do forgive sins by doing something even more
Cooler.
important, which is healing.
Yeah, that was one of Jesus's greatest hits. But
Yeah.
but to your point though, yeah, it is an interesting thing where it's like he's forgiving sins. And it's interesting too, because if you look in the Old Testament, and you can do a quick Google search, it's basically this law is not too hard to follow. So, there's
Mhm.
always this like Christian mentality that like, oh, the laws of Moses, they were so impossible to follow. Everyone was doomed until Jesus came, paid the
Mm.
ultimate sacrifice. Now we can all go to heaven, because before then it was impossible. But if you like talk to any Jewish person and even read the Old Testament, like Hezekiah was blameless in the sight of the Lord. I mean, there was multiple people
Mhm.
that were blameless and sinless in the sight of the Lord. And God said when he implemented the laws, this is not too hard for you to keep. It
No, I think it's a good point, and I think that it's also related to the fact that Jesus says that the law has to be kept, but also, like you said, he comes to make us understand that it's more than just what the law says. Actually, I think that personally, I think that what I understand is that God is looking to have our hearts change, not necessarily to for us to just answer to specific directions only. And he really is more interested in the end that we are not interested in lusting, that we're not interested in killing. And that's why I think that Jesus says, let's say, well, if you lust in your mind or things like that, that's as bad, because at the end of the day, God is not interested in having only children, in my mind, that would just follow the laws that he has gotten. He wants us to be interested in participating in it with our hearts. That's what I would say.
so first, so couple of things, and if there's nothing you take away from this, I hope that you just think about this possibly if it changed my life for the better actually. um, when you so first of all, I did a lot of like Bible studies, and when I did Bible studies and I led Bible studies, they give you a track that they want you to take a lot of times. And typically what it is, even if you do like Bible 365, which is like it was trending back in my day. It's crazy to me. I just heard it the other day and I'm like, that's still around. But anyways, where what they'll do is they'll say, read this section of like the Old Testament, now read Ephesians, now read this of the Old Testament, now read Galatians, or they keep doing these like parallels, and it like breaks your context a little bit. Now, the Old Testament is such a slog. I don't know how people other than total psychos like me actually just read it,
Oh,
because
I read the Old Testament.
okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay. So you know what okay, so
Yeah.
here's what I'm gonna propose. Here's what I'm
Yeah.
proposing. When you read the Old Testament from the beginning to the end of the Old Testament, now we're already probably a little bit predisposed because we probably also know the New Testament, at least stories and concepts. But even when you read the Old Testament, if you read it straight through, what you'll notice is that the basically all through up until like the major prophets, it's not about sinlessness, and to your point, like not lusting and not etc. Half of the 10 commandments are just about God being a jealous God. Half of the commandments aren't about don't have slaves,
Mhm.
treat your fellow
Right.
female like you would treat your fellow male. Things that we would think are like, wow, this is like good for humanity. They're just like put Yahweh first, and you get that
Mhm.
through like three-fourths or at least two-thirds of the Old Testament. Now, I will say, when you get into Isaiah, especially like Deutero Isaiah and Jeremiah, now you start getting a little bit new concept. Now the Israelites no longer have a home. They're displaced or being displaced into a foreign land, and they're coming up with a new identity. And one of the things that Isaiah and Jeremiah are saying is, listen, we've done wrong. We have not taken care of the widows. We have not taken care of the orphans. We've done wrong by our people, and that is why we're getting punished. So you get this like pivot where it's all of a sudden now it's like, whoa, this went from like genocide the Amalekites, genocide the 80 cities that Joshua conquested, and now all of a sudden it's about, wait a minute, we need to like take care of our, hurt and weak. And when did Pythagoras step on the scene? Right at the same time. When did Socrates step on the scene? 100 years later. And then you get the thoughts of Plato, and then you get the thoughts of like the philosophers, and you get Zoroastrianism, you get Buddha at 500 BC. You've got these thought processes starting to boil up in ancient societies where it's not just about your God's the storm warrior God Yahweh. It's
Mhm.
like, kill all the others and take the land because it was your covenant promise. Now all of a sudden it's a little bit more like Confucianism, where it's like, actually, let's treat each other with love. And like Hillel said 100 years before Jesus, the
No,
Jewish rabbi,
I agree with you. I agree
don't
with you.
do unto others what you wouldn't want done to you. You know what I
Yep.
mean? It's like this kind of new philosophy, and
Yeah, of
it
course.
blooms kind of in that time period.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something that I see too when I read the Old Testament. There's kind of this change that happens slowly in many thoughts, and I think it's you point to something that's very important, and the fact that many of the texts of the Bible, I think, are influenced by the culture of the day, and that can change the kind of way that it's portrayed, or the way that ideas might change from one way to another in the Bible. That's really important, I think. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting to me because, like, so Islam, for example, claims that what makes the Quran special is that it introduced scientific concepts that weren't available at the time that it was, created. Now, I
I think
throw flag on the I
that's
throw
easily
flag on the play a little bit.
that's easily debunked.
I
I
agree.
I don't think that sperm is in the backbone. I don't
I,
think.
Thank you for
No.
that one.
dude, and I actually always forget that sperm one.
I don't.
appreciate
I don't forget that one.
I don't think that Mohammed split the moon.
Yeah,
I think maybe his moons were split, but that's another story.
But
Okay,
you can
so
see
wait,
where it's
wait, wait.
flipped. Yeah.
Okay, but he's talking. It's Max, yeah,
Yeah.
Max. So we're talking about how it's because it was in a certain time, and maybe that's not what you were getting at, but that I think that actually proves more about how much of the Bible was written by men who only knew the context of the time they were living in.
Absolutely, you're right. I think
And
that.
so
Yeah.
I find that hard to translate when I'm trying to think about like an all-knowing God.
But don't you
Like
think
if
that
I was an
God?
all-knowing God and I wanted to explain my word to people, why wouldn't I have spoken to people no matter what time frame they were in and what I thought was the most true and the best thing for them to learn?
Well, maybe you would have done this that way. I agree that could be a way to do it. And honestly, I'm not in the position, I think, to make a judgment about that specifically because I'm just human. But I would say, don't you believe that God can plan the universe in such a way that through the history of man, the word that he puts in the Bible, even though it is influenced by culture, can be, in the end, the message that he wants to send. I don't understand that there is a lot of problem that can come with that in the fact that you can interpret a lot of passages in the Bible in a way that shows that God would be, let's say, evil. But then, to me, I'm just not ready to say that that would be the case because I think that there is other arguments that could show that maybe there's some things that we're not getting when we look at these passages. But it's a place that I would go more deeply into study because I'm not an expert into textual analysis and all this stuff.
So let me share something on the screen. I'm just going to share. I'm not going to read through all these verses, but I do want just a few thoughts out for the viewers, and if you wanted to look into it later,
Yeah.
because I appreciate like us, you're a person that likes to just think outside the box and actually
Or just actually ask questions and
ask
consider them.
questions because
course.
because there could be very good reasons for some of this. Okay, so Jeremiah 33:17. So this is one of the more clear, in my opinion, examples. Oh boy, I promise I'm good at this. It's been a minute.
Better than I am.
There we go. Okay, so this is Jeremiah 33:17 and 18. Obviously, as per usual, read this in context. This is referring to the end age, right? So Jeremiah is getting into some deep prophecy stuff. Like this is when Israel's back, a nation forever, an everlasting nation. It says, for thus says the Lord, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel. Never. And the Levitical priests shall never lack a man in my presence to offer burnt offerings or to make grain offerings and to make sacrifices for all time. And this is very clear biblical Hebrew. So, and people can Google this. This is not like a, translation thing. No. This is very descriptive. And what's interesting is this, so this is Jeremiah 33:17. There's many other references. Another one I'll throw out for people if you want to read some more. Zechariah 14, 16 through 21. So actually just read Zechariah 14. Some great biblical prophecy there in terms of what it looks like. Exact same thing that Jeremiah is saying here. And also Isaiah 66, particularly 66, like 21 through 23, talking about the same thing. In the end times, we're going to be doing sacrifices forever. We're going to be doing burnt offerings. It's going to be a physical, Israel and Jerusalem. But then you've got in the New Testament, Hebrews 7, 11, and 12, which is saying, now if perfection had been attainable through the Levitical priesthood, for the people received the law under this priesthood, what further need would there have been to speak of another priest arising according to the order of Melchizedek rather than one according to the order of Aaron? Hebrews had a Levite and Aaron thing going on. That's a fun thing to look into. For when there's a change in priesthood, there is necessarily a change in the law as well. So Hebrews argues, and if you just read Hebrews, it's arguing that the law is gone and that we don't need sacrifices anymore. In fact, I think, Hebrews 7, 18 and 19, there is on the one hand the abrogation of an earlier commandment because it was weak and ineffective or ineffectual, for the law made nothing perfect. There is, on the other hand, the introduction of a better hope through which we approach God. So you've got this, like, again, another one of these dichotomies, and I feel like when I read, like, the Bible as a whole, I'm just constantly getting whiplash. It's like, are we sacrificing forever? Are we doing the law? Are we not doing the law? Is Yahweh good? Is Jesus Yahweh? Because Jesus seemed good, but Yahweh seemed mean. Like, what? How? Like,
and I think we've illustrated this pretty well, and I'd like to hear Max expand a little more. And I'd also like to hear, and I don't want to necessarily segue immediately and give ourselves whiplash, but you mentioned studying yourself kind of into it and that you found proofs that you found convincing. And I would be interested to hear, whether biblical or otherwise, what some of that looked like for you, because maybe there are things that we're focusing on that don't matter as much to you and things that you're focusing on that we maybe need to look deeper into.
That's interesting. I think that you're very, how could I say? I think you put very much importance in the consistency of the Bible, and that's great. Honestly, I think that in the end, the book of God has to be consistent. And I agree with you that at face value, if you take these two, this whiplash that you were talking about, it definitely, if it is the case that there is complete contradiction and that this is not the word of God, well, of course, I think that shows that the Bible is not inspired, and you could follow in this train of thinking. I think it's a great argument. Now, for me, right now, I mean, this seemed interesting. I would love to take more time to look at it, but I just know I know almost nothing about it, so I cannot make my mind right now about any of this stuff.
Sure, and we would never ask you to.
Oh, yeah.
Just by bringing up the questions, and some of these are just some of the questions we ourselves have wrestled with, which is why we are drawn to them specifically, which doesn't mean that that's the only path that this could go down. But
and keep in mind, Max, in your total defense, like, I had 33 literal years to wrestle with this, right? So, like, I remember, like, when I was in that Bible camp, and I was like, when I heard for the first time that the ending of Mark wasn't the original ending, and they're like, and it's funny because they did it on purpose. They told us in this Bible camp, by the way, here are things that you're going to hear, and this one is true. And I'm just like,
I think, can I interject here?
Yeah.
I think what I can see from what you said and what you guys are talking about is I can see how much damage the lies of people can do to faith. And I'm very sorry that you had to deal with people that push lies. To me, what I would say is that, contradiction in the Bible are not things that are very important for my faith right now. Um, if I was indoctrinated, if I
That's a
had
tough one.
been indoctrinated
Yeah.
from my childhood, probably it would have made me think that I was lied to, and that would have made me, question a lot more things. But since I have not been, to me, these things are interesting, but
So what
I don't
is
base my
important
belief
then?
on that.
Right. And
What
that was what I was kind of getting at.
Yeah.
So where did it like really take off for you, or what was really the most convincing?
Yeah. I think to me, first I'd like to say that I'm open to the idea that Christianity is not true, but then after that, I would have to deconstruct the idea of God, and that would be an idea that would be very hard to deconstruct. To me, Christianity is something that just makes more sense than other religions, honestly. And the reason why I think it's very hard to take out the idea of God is because I think it makes so much more sense of reality than, let's say, materialism and naturalism. Uh, Even I would say that one thing um, that makes me go against the idea that there is no God is because I think that it just destroys the idea of rationality completely. And that is a leap of faith that I'm just not ready to do. Also, I think that without having a God, I think that ultimately there is no objective moral values. And to me, that is something I'm just not ready to accept. I think that we have strong reasons to believe that objective reality is true, and that it's a big part of reality. So, for the sake of rationality and moral values, I think these are two things that I would not be able to, let go of without really, really, really having been convinced by something really strong otherwise.
I definitely wouldn't disagree with you. That's why we're considered like agnostic atheists. So
So, and
yeah.
sorry,
No, go ahead.
there's a couple different things you said throughout our conversation. One of which being that you're very convinced that there's at least got to be a spiritual, like,
Dimension, yeah.
dimension. Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we necessarily disagree with that. Just because we haven't been convinced by any particular religion or God doesn't mean that
Especially
we're
Christianity.
opposed to the idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would argue with the idea, and I don't have to get into the objective versus subjective morality argument per se, but I do struggle with finding the morals in the book. And if they're not in the book, then how are we getting them from God?
Well, let's say for me that morality in the book of Christianity, that's a that's secondary to me. I'm interested in learning more about it, but I believe that you know that the grounding of objective morality is more foundational and more important than finding the exact morality in the book. I would believe that you can find it in the book if you understand it well enough. But I also think that we're not in a position to know everything about morality, being human beings. But I would not say that morality, finding the exact morality in the book of the Bible, is necessarily as important as having a foundation and grounding for having moral beliefs that are objective versus subjective. To me, that's very, very important.
So why Christianity? Because there's a lot of other like there's like Mani, there's like Buddhism, there's Hinduism,
Mhm.
there's Islam, there's a
To
ton of
me,
other religions out
to me,
there.
all of these religions are easily debunked.
But I think
Yeah.
Christianity is easily debunked.
Oh
We've
yeah,
already
yeah.
shown how the Bible is completely full of holes. I mean, what
Well,
about
well,
Christianity is not debunked? What about it? Are you
Is
saying the Muhammad didn't split them in two, but Jesus definitely had a virgin birth? Like, how in the world are you saying that's ridiculous, but this is totally plausible?
Well, I would say that it's a very fair criticism, and to me, right now, in my knowledge, I am not in a position to have any substantive way to defend the inconsistencies in the Bible or the specific claims of the Bible. I am not in the position to do that at all. So I would say that is a fair criticism and very strong argument against Christianity. The way that I currently I am thinking about this is I think that God can use men to write things in such a way that is sufficient for him to convey the message that he needs to convey or wants to convey. Now, that's a rationalization that needs
But why
further.
didn't God do that in the Quran? Why didn't God do that through the Vedas? Why didn't God do that through Buddha? Like, I could say that he did it with all of them, and their truths are true. In fact, I
Oh,
could say
sure,
that
that's
Vedas
sure.
predate the Old Testament by 1,000 years.
Sure, that's something you can say, but I think that there are philosophical problems with the Buddhism that are not reconcilable with the way that I see God, and
What are
also I
those? What are those?
well I think that God to be all loving, there cannot be just an unity in being. There needs to be multiple persons. To me, that's just logical.
So like the
Like
Trinity.
multiple gods?
Not multiple gods, multiple persons.
Like the Godhead, the Trinity?
Yeah, the Trinity. Yeah.
So then, what are your thoughts on like Brahman, Vishnu, and Brahma and Shiva? That's a trinity in Hinduism.
I don't see this as a trinity because it's not like one being having multiple persons. To me, that's multiple gods, and that's not parsimonious. And
Where
I don't
is
think
where is the Trinity found in the Bible?
I think the Trinity is taught through the Bible as a concept that you can infer from the text of the Bible.
It's not. It was Tertullian in 300 CE. There was no Trinity. Now, you got close with the Gospel of John because he was highly influenced by Philo. This is more of a research after the fact sort of thing. And for any viewers that are out there, please look into Neoplatonism, the influences on Philo, and then, of course, John coming from that community being
Sure.
influenced by Philo with like the concept of the logos. But this is purely Platonic. Like this is a great concept. And again, it comes out of this milieu. And we all know that the real reason Christianity won out was the same reason any of the religions won out. Hinduism is an exception, and probably Buddhism actually, but like there's some like hardcore religions out there where it's like you either subscribe to this religion or you get the sword, basically, which is what happened when Theodosius took over in 400 CE.
Sure.
And then, of course, all through the Middle Ages. So that spread. Now, Christianity didn't spread nearly as fast as Mormonism. Mormonism like shot off the charts, and like there's going to be way more Mormons statistically than Christians in 2,000 years. But what I'm getting at is it's like all of the like positions just seem like I like the way this sounds personally, so I'm going to subscribe to it, which is totally fine. And when we set out to have this conversation, you did not neither one of us on either side like were dishonest. Like we had the conversation like
Yeah.
this is why we're interested in knowing why you believe what you believe. Is it something that should convince other viewers or like ourselves to like maybe move positions? And maybe it did, but to me it just kind of sounds like this makes the most sense to me. The Bible's full of a bunch of holes, so we can't really
Well,
take all of the things in the Bible. We can take the concept of the
no,
Bible.
but okay. Maybe I wasn't clear. I don't think that. I don't think necessarily that the Bible is full of holes in the end. It could be, but that's not foundational to my belief. I think you attribute a lot of weight to the fact that maybe like humans made these writings of the Bible and they were influenced, and also like the concept of the Trinity. You seem to attribute a lot of importance that the idea was maybe developed later. I don't really care if the authors of the Bible thought the Trinity was true or not. To me, at the end of the day, I think God can use the text of the Bible in the way that He wants through human history to convey the message that He thinks is right. But I agree with you, though, that if you believe that there are good arguments to think that God does not exist, then there are really good arguments to think that the Bible is a deception and a way to manipulate men. I think that is a good argument.
I appreciate that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. Because first of all, I don't discount the fact that there is probably a God. Because I have done so much study into Christianity in terms of church history, how things came about, the corruption, the book and the problems with the book, it makes it hard for me to believe that the Christian God is real. It could very well be possible that another ancient deity that maybe got lost to time is real. It could be that there's another religion out there that's currently
Mhm.
real, or that maybe we're going to discover it 1,000 years from now through some telescope. I don't know.
I want to interject because I
Yes,
think
please.
that's foundational to our two types of thinking. Um, you seem to have an idea that we can find God in some kind of telescope. I don't see God that way. To me, either God is the concept that we find in the how is he called? Anselm, I think, the greatest conceivable being. I think either God is that or there is no God. To me, that is the point that I would go. So
Okay, I would
yeah,
challenge you to study Hindu because you sound like that is the core of Hinduism. Like you are like so Hindu right now, which is good. I love Hinduism actually. It's a very cool concept.
I know,
But
but I think
Hindus would accept Christians because they'd say,
but
"You know
but I
what? You're
think that the
right."
concept of Hinduism is flawed. I don't think that's
How is
really not.
Hinduism flawed?
Well, I think that the concept of Hinduism doesn't come close to a perfect being, to my
Why?
idea.
How is Brahman not a perfect being?
Well, okay, first I don't know anything. Sorry, not
So
anything.
did
I
you
don't.
just say Hinduism's wrong, and then are you going to say you don't know anything about Hinduism
Sorry,
or Brahman?
Hold on.
I didn't
Sorry.
say the right word.
Okay,
I don't
okay,
know
sorry, sorry.
everything about Hinduism,
That's fair.
but
Okay, I don't either.
from what I understand of Hinduism, um, the concept of love is not very is not very understood from what I understand.
Okay, well, I'm just saying you might want to do a little research into that. I think this has been a good conversation. We would love to have you back because
Sure.
you're an incredible thinker. You challenge us. I think you've challenged the audience in terms of like thought-provoking ideas. And honestly, I really appreciate the
I
conversation.
adored our conversation. It was so fun. I hope I can be back to talk with you
I
guys
would
more.
love
I
that.
think that was so fun.
Do we have to end?
Wow.
Are you needing
Huh?
to leave or can we go down one more rabbit hole?
Oh, she's gonna
Oh,
run.
sure, sure, sure. Go for it. Go for it. Yeah.
So there was a couple times where you talked about God being just.
Yeah.
And that is actually one of my biggest struggles and one of the things that kind of led to my deconversion
Hmm.
was reading some of the passages where God gave commandments that I just couldn't consider just in any manner of the word. And so then I just really struggled to wrap my head around how could this be a consequence that a just God would give that I'm just supposed to learn from it and then assume that it's okay to treat people that way. We could go to David and Bathsheba. We could go to
Yeah.
No, I don't think we have to go in the specific unless you want to,
no, we don't
because I
necessarily
yeah
if you know what
yeah
it if you kind
yeah
of
I
get
know
the
what you're
gist of
talking. Yeah, of course
yeah.
I know what you're talking about. I think it's a very good argument, and I think it's a very good reason to doubt, honestly, because to me it's quite clear if God is not just and if He commands to do things that are evil, that's not, it's not consistent. That does not work logically, right? It's just not. That's not real, you know. So of course, if God commands evil, it's just not possible first that He commands evil. So that would be a really big problem. And I think that to me, what I would say is that there is something in these commandments that is not specifically and exactly what we define as genocide or killing and with no reason. I think that there is something more to that. But like I said, I
I
really want
don't
to do
think you
more.
do know the verse that she was talking about. This one's actually a little bit unique.
Okay,
Um,
let's go for it then.
okay,
Let's get it straight. Yeah.
this is a pretty unique situation.
Yeah.
So, okay, so the plot line here is that David David, remember, he like saw Bathsheba bathing,
Mhm.
and he did the whole thing where he killed Bathsheba's husband by sending him out in the front lines. He
Yeah.
dies, and he's been sinning in the eyes of the Lord,
Yeah.
even though God, of course, is saying like you're a man after my own heart and this sort of thing. But then what happens is he says, here, I'm going to share my screen real quick. There's actually quite a bit. I'm not going to go into all this. I do encourage you to like definitely look into this because it's like,
Oh yeah, I'm going down rabbit holes recently. Yeah, of course.
This is amazing. Not only is it an interesting story, the fact that they would, if you come back, I'll tell you the reason I think they put this in the Bible.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure you have
a
you have
because
a,
why?
yeah,
Because if you were making a book where you wanted people to think that your King David was like awesome, why would you put this in there? I actually know the reason. But 2 Samuel 12, 8 through 12, read the whole chapter, everyone, because it's like context is everything. Okay, God said, I gave you my master's house and your master's wives into your bosom, and gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would have added much more. Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite. That was Bathsheba's husband. So David like sees Bathsheba looking hot on top of her, apartment bathing. He summons for her, which there's no consent there when the king summons for you. And then he's like, no, I want her now. So he sends Uriah the Hittite out to the front lines, who gets murdered. And you have struck down, the Lord says, Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Okay, now I'm going to stop there. If you're Yahweh and your prized dude has committed like a really weird sex crime and also then murdered their husband so that they could be yours, like, what do you think as a god would be like a just punishment for that? Like, what would be like, hey, if you were God, and there's no, we're not asking you to commit blasphemy here because this is hypothetical, but like, what would you say is like, okay, what am I going to do with this dude? Just curious. People in the chat can also chime in.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, I really don't know, because I don't want to presume that I can put myself in the shoes of God.
And that's fair. And if you're a believer, I'm not going to ask you to do that. So I am going to read on, and I'm going to ask you though, if you think that after hearing what Yahweh did, if you think that this is still okay. So Yahweh says, now therefore, the sword shall never depart from your house, for you have despised me and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, I, Yahweh, will raise up trouble against you from within your house. I, God, will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in broad daylight. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel in broad daylight. And then what happens is David's son, Absalom, overthrows David, like within weeks of this statement, takes all of David's wives, including Bathsheba, which would have been a stepmother, up to the roof of the palace and fornicates with them in front of all of Israel to cast shame on them. So Yahweh has the wives raped in front of all of Israel, which, by the way, if a woman is raped with another man, the punishment is death for that woman. And it was done in all broad daylight. So not only are they being like sexually defiled as a punishment, so basically it's like, if you did a sin or if I did a sin, is it right for our significant partner to be raped as our punishment?
So, of course not. Of course not. It's not right. But
thank you for
being honest.
Yeah, no,
that's terrible.
No, it's not right. You should not rape. And I would say, yeah, like, of course, like, and my thinking would be, well, you just said it. The punishment for rape is death. So, to my mind, there is more to this than the plain reading of the text. That would be how I see things.
So is it okay?
Sorry?
So is it okay then? Because like, well,
No, it's not
so
okay.
spoiler alert, David's wives didn't get murdered because David came back to power, squashed down Absalom, took his wives back. So the only thing the wives had to suffer was getting raped in front of all Israel by the hand of
only
God.
thing.
That's all they had to suffer, was just getting raped in front of all Israel by the hand of God.
No,
Was this a just punishment
well,
by the God that is supposed to be your Trinity? And you're saying that Jesus and the God of the Old Testament are all one, like you
no, I'm
love
not.
this
I'm
Trinity.
not
I
saying
think
that.
it's disgusting.
I'm not saying that. And I would ask you, do you think that's just?
Not at all.
No.
This is
Same.
terrible. By the way,
That's
this is
terrible.
only the first
Yeah,
punishment. The
yeah,
second punishment, if you continue to read, we won't go there. You can
yeah.
like look it up later. People can on the side. But what happened
That's
was
terrible. Yes.
Bathsheba got pregnant with David's son, and as a
Mhm.
further punishment, David got scourged. Just kidding. Nothing happened to David. The son got sick and died. God killed the kid. Like, oh, and by the way, not only am I going to have your wives raped, because of course in the Old Testament, under Yahweh's rule, women were property, but I'm also going to have your kid killed by my own sickness that I'm going to give him. I mean, it's just like, and this is just one example. Like we've got,
Which, and I don't
Oh,
want to
I
like
know. I
we're
know
not
double,
going to
about it.
I
belabor
Yeah,
don't want
this.
to
it's
double and
crazy.
triple down
Yeah.
on that. My point was that there are some of these things that I don't think at a first pass we really thought about. And there are really quick ways to try to make it sound better. Like, well, there surely is something about this. Like, surely all of the Ammonites were evil and they all deserve to die.
I think
Or
I think it's very complicated, but of course,
But
um,
is that a reason?
what?
So it's very complicated is not a reason. It's very complicated means I'm going to put a pin in it and I'm going to research it, right? That's a good response.
Well, yeah,
Complicated as
yeah.
long as you continue to research it. But what really drives me crazy is when Christians, and I'm not going to name denominations, are like, it's complicated. That's the Old Testament. And then they go
Oh,
about
oh,
teaching their kids
that's
that
not
God's perfect.
that's
It
not
just
what
drives me
I
bonkers.
that's not what I meant by it's
and I don't believe that
complicated.
that's
Yeah,
what he
Yeah,
meant. I
yeah,
think
yeah.
he's
yeah,
just trying to say
Um,
that there are people that we talk to who
let
yeah.
me say let me say I'm not enough of an expert in that subject to really go deep into it, but let me say just that my thinking about that is that there is a possibility that there is more to this than just the plain reading of what we just read. Okay, and I don't want to sound as if I'm making excuses. Of course it sounds like that, but I'm ready to accept that this book is not from God. And if the book is not from God, of course these are examples of how man justifies rape and things like that, and this is horrible. And I agree that if that's what the text says specifically, that's exactly what it means, that's horrible. I agree with that. What I think is that there is more to it than just the plain reading of the text, and to me that would be either in a combination of things that we don't understand of the time, not that things change morally, but that there is language and ways of talking that we just don't have the same reference to what we have today. Um, I would say that's a possibility for some passages. And secondly, I would say that maybe there is teachings in the way that the things are worded that is more than just about what we read specifically. But I agree that if you read it plainly and that you just follow what it says, I agree that it is a strong argument against the morality of God in the Old Testament. I think it's a very strong argument, a very, very strong argument. But the reason why I'm not ready to go straight into the plain reading is because you also have the opposite. What what are you giving up by going to the fact that there would be no God? That to me is something that would make you give up so much of reality. I'm just not ready to say that there's no possibility that
and I think
things.
that
Yeah,
your response is first of all honest.
Yeah, in a very good response.
I mean, you're willing to say I don't know everything about that, which is one of my favorite things to say. I don't know everything about a lot of things.
yeah,
I don't know everything about any of this. It's just my studies and my thoughts and my questions the same as yours. I think I had a point.
Can I just say
Yes.
I don't know much about that specifically, like what you talk. Can I have the name of your names, please?
Oh
'Cause
yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
I'm Adele.
And I'm Josh.
Adele, and sorry, what?
And Josh.
Josh. Okay. So what Josh was saying, I'm like these Old Testament passages. I have not studied enough the history and the context of it to make my mind about it. But I would say that to me, the idea that the objectivity of morals would not exist is something so impossible to my mind that it's more possible that there is a reason for these passages than that there is no objective morality. You see, that's
And
something
that's
I have to
something I
struggle with right
completely
now.
understand.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that you're on an excellent path. I think also with your, like, we started this conversation with like speaking about intelligence, right? Like
Yeah.
with your level of intelligence and your approach to things, like with reason, I think you're going to come to one of two conclusions. Obviously, you're going to come to the conclusion that yes, this is the way to go. This is the thing to believe in, and and that's the path to go. Or you're going to say, you know what, maybe let me look at some other options, because I still believe in a God, but maybe we don't know which God it is. Maybe we don't have a way to see that God, or maybe it's, one of
Well,
these
I'm
deities of
really,
old. Who knows?
I'm really taken aback by the fact that you guys are not, you know, taking away the idea of God. That's so refreshing to my mind. Okay, well, I loved our discussions. I hope that we can talk again about this subject. It's
I
so
would love
amazing.
to.
Honestly, to me, Christianity makes sense of many, many things. And maybe we can talk about other religions in other
Yeah.
discussions, so we
We can
can
talk about anything you
maybe
want.
take a look, because to me, I really think that from what I know, other religions lack philosophical reason to believe in them. So that's something that really bugs my mind. That might be really interesting to talk about. Yeah.
And you know what? Another thing, if you don't mind subscribing so
Oh,
that you can
sure.
see when we're live again.
For sure, I
Another
would
thing I'd
subscribe.
love to chat
Yeah, I
about next
subscribe.
time is the idea
Yeah.
of like where we might be able to still find morals now that we don't have that God piece in our life.
Right. So if we don't believe in a God, like, how are we not horrible people, or are we?
I think that
We might be. We'll
I
have a
think
conversation.
I want to say before we end that
Oh yeah.
you do not need to have objective. Sorry, you are not a horrible person if you don't believe in God. No way. And you can be much more moral of a person as a non-believer than as a believer, in my mind.
And
Okay,
vice versa, I
that's
think.
to me that's not related. But to me, the objectivity of moral values is so foundational and important to reality that I can't even imagine to live in a world where it's not the case. I would say that. Yeah.
Well, Max, you've been fantastic. Definitely. We try to post usually an hour or two before we go live. It's usually Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. But if you ever available and want to chat again, love to have you back. You're fantastic, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you, and you are fantastic too. I loved our discussion. I can't
Me
wait to talk
too.
to you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Cool. Big W, Max.
Big W, Max.
I think we're gonna call it here.
Yeah.
Because
we both had a couple bouts of sleepless nights and a tummy bug, so we are not at our best. But we had a great conversation with Max. I'm
Max
so glad
was
we got
so
to come
cool.
on and meet him.
Yeah. Anybody who's got that like level of like reason and discourse is fantastic.
And just the honesty with the text to say, yeah, you're right. I don't know exactly how to explain that. I don't think that makes.
And maybe they'll come back and say, hey, here's where this is what I was going to say, or this is where you were a little off. I mean, they might have some great rebuttals on things too. So yeah, that was awesome.
In the meantime, thank you so much for our friends that came in and gave us some likes and some love. And we will hopefully be back in a couple days and a little bit more refreshed.
Until next time.
Thanks, Unlikely Winter. I appreciate your comments as well.
Keep your stick on the ice. Dang, that's already taken. I can't believe I said that.
What?
That's from Red Green Show.